In the last video, we explored the uses and potential misuses of psychiatric diagnosis. In this video, we're going to look at the power threat meaning framework, which is an idea or a group of ideas about mental health, which offers an alternative to psychiatric diagnosis. It's important to say that it's not an attempt to replace it entirely. So if you really identify with your diagnosis, then it's not an attempt to undermine that, but it is an attempt to just offer a different perspective and a different angle on how to understand mental health in general. If you're doing this course in order and you've watched all the videos in order, you'll probably realise as we talk about this just how much it complements the person-centered approach and person-centered theory. In my head, it's kind of the same thing but reformulated, essentially. They're both so in line with each other. The power threat meaning framework, or PTMF, was put together by a group of psychologists with a group of service users or ex-service users of the mental health system. I think this is an important thing to point out because it highlights the values that are really quite central to the power threat meaning framework. That is, it's put together and it's talked about in dialogue and in collaboration with the client or the service user, or however you want to frame it, the person maybe. I suppose this is in contrast to the medical model, psychiatric diagnosis, where I think traditionally at least it's less about collaboration and working with, but rather doing to. I think a lot of the issues some people have with the mental health system as it is traditionally done is this attitude of doing things to them rather than, listening and working with them. It's practitioner-centered rather than person-centered. So person-centered would be about listening to the person and offering a space for them to feel heard, and that being the starting point for anything that you do to help them. Whereas practitioner-centered would be immediately thinking about what they need to do to fix them, which no doubt is often well-intentioned but can leave people feeling unheard. And if a person feels unheard, then they may well display difficult behaviour, and that's going to probably encourage the practitioner to treat them even more of an object and not listen to them because they maybe feel under attack, and a certain feedback loop begins which results in a relationship breaking down and it not being helpful and somebody being potentially re-traumatized or certainly finding it very stressful. The power threat meaning framework then is, I suppose, an attempt in part to give power back to the person. It's explored in collaboration. The power threat meaning framework is based on a great deal of evidence which suggests that if we know enough about people's relationships, social situations and life stories and the struggles they have faced or are still facing, it is possible to make sense of these experiences, and I suppose also possible to make sense of the meaning of what we'd usually call mental health symptoms. Dr. Lucy Johnston, one of the authors of the framework, goes into it in a bit more detail here, which I think clarifies it a little bit more. The power threat meaning framework can be used as a way of helping people to create more hopeful narratives or stories about their lives and the difficulties they have faced or are still facing, instead of seeing themselves as blameworthy, weak, deficient, or mentally ill. It highlights and clarifies the links between wider social factors such as poverty, discrimination, and inequality, along with traumas such as abuse and violence and the resulting emotional distress or troubled behaviour, whether it's confusion, fear, despair, or other troubled or troubling behaviour. It also shows why those of us who do not have an obvious history of trauma or adversity can still struggle to find a sense of self-worth, meaning and identity. You don't necessarily need to have gone through a distinct traumatic event or series of traumatic events in order to struggle with your mental health. It could be an accumulation of little things that build up and affect how you develop and how you see yourself. This goes back to conditions of worth, I guess. It reminds me also of Francine Shapiro, who developed EMDR, which is a trauma therapy. She makes a point of making a distinction between big T trauma and little t trauma. So big T trauma are like specific things that you go through that have a traumatizing impact on you, and little t trauma might not be a specific event but might be an accumulation of little things, like living in a culture, whether a family culture or a societal culture, where you don't feel as though you are heard or you can express your needs. For the purposes of EMDR at least, Francine Shapiro doesn't make a particular distinction between the two. She highlights that actually whether it's big T trauma, specific events, or little t trauma, like a constant drip of little events, either one can be a legitimate use of the word. So the power threat meaning framework can be summarised with these 6 questions. 4 about stuff that's happened to you and your response to that stuff, and then 2 more at the bottom. So firstly, what has happened to you? How is power operating in your life? How has power operated maybe in your life? What have you been through that you found really distressing or uncomfortable, and yet you have found yourself powerless to do anything about it? Again, this could be an individual event, or it could be a series of mini events where you felt this way. Secondly, how did that affect you? What kind of threat did this pose to you? Thirdly, what sense did you make of it? What kind of meaning did you draw from as a result of these situations and experiences? What conclusions did you draw about yourself, about other people, about the world at large? And then fourthly, what did you have to do in order to survive? So what kind of threat responses are you using now? What did you need to do at the time? What threat responses are you using now? And threat responses are a way that the power threat meaning framework conceptualizes what we'd usually call mental health symptoms. And we'll get into this in more detail later on in the video. The next 2 questions then, after you've worked out some kind of narrative for what your body's trying to do and what it's trying to protect you from and why, you can look at what are your strengths, what access to power resources do you have, and also what is your story, how does all this fit together. This is all what we'd call a trauma-informed approach, the idea that people's behaviour is kind of understandable and people don't just randomly do things for no reason. Kind of summarised somewhat here. For most of us, a man coming down the street is just someone taking a walk. A rape victim, however, may see a person who is about to molest her and go into a panic due to what she's been through, and her threat response may well go that way. A stern school teacher may be an intimidating presence to an average kid, but for a child whose stepfather beats him up, she may represent a torturer and precipitate a rage attack or a terrified cowering in the corner. The basic working assumption here is that people generally do things for a reason, and these things can often be understandable if we know enough about their lives and understand the connections they've made and the meanings they've made in their experience. On to the first question then, what has happened to you, or how is power operating in your life? Power can operate through our partners, families, friends, communities, schools, work, health services, the police, government and the media. It could be any of these things where we either feel powerful or powerless. Power can be used negatively, for example when people are hurt, excluded or silenced by others. It can also be used positively, such as when others protect and care for us. So some people, for example, might feel empowered by the police or the government, and then other people may well feel threatened. They may feel disempowered by those people due to experiences. It can go either way. And similarly, the school environment can help a person feel empowered. It could also, for a kid who's been bullied, for example, be a really disempowering place where they feel utterly powerless. But anyway, there's a great deal of evidence that the negative use of power, both in the past and in the present, can lead to mental health problems. There's also evidence that we can be helped and protected by positive and supportive power. And in this respect, I suppose going through something that's really traumatic isn't a simple cause and effect. Go through something traumatic, therefore you're really impacted by that and it defines the rest of your life. Like in the book, the straight talking introduction to the power threat meaning framework, which is probably a way into this if you want to engage with this on a deeper level but don't want to tackle the main document itself, this is probably a decent thing worth buying. They're talking here, and I'm sure they do in the main document, about how the same experience can have a different impact depending on what resources of power that person has. So let's say a kid who is sexually abused by a teacher or a neighbour, their experience might be very different depending on what support they have around them. For example, if their parents are around and attentive and listen to them and support them, or if their parents don't believe them or dismiss them, or maybe they don't have a relationship with the parents whereby they feel able to tell them in the first place. All these different factors play into the conclusions that somebody might draw from a traumatic experience, and it plays into the impact that that experience ultimately has on them. There's a brief list at the bottom about some of the different types of power that might exist, and I think this is really where the power threat meaning framework offers something that's quite distinct from the medical model and psychiatric diagnosis. So, for example, social or cultural capital, ideological power can really factor in, let's say, the experience of being an immigrant in a particular country and really feeling othered by your day-to-day life in a country. This factors in how that might play a part in the development of mental health difficulties. For a few other examples, the impact that poverty can have on someone's mental health. Somebody not having much money, that's a form of powerlessness. People who are of colour and people who are in the LGBTQ plus communities are statistically more likely to develop mental health difficulties. This framework can take that into account. It at least acknowledges the possibility of those forms of power or those feelings of powerlessness having an impact on a person in a way that mental health diagnosis traditionally doesn't do. The next question is asking, how did this affect you, whatever it is? What kind of threat did this pose? So this could be a physical threat. You may have been fearful that you were going to die or that you were going to get injured. It may be a threat of losing all of your social connections for whatever reason. It may be a threat of losing your house and being homeless. It may be a threat of being ill and not being able to live independently. It may be a threat to your values, and there could be any number of other things it could be. And as I said before, it's not just the experience itself, it's also the broader situation in your life that can have an impact on how these things impact you. And here is a list that's been put together and is in the document about the different factors that can play a part in that. I think there are too many for me to read out here, but feel free to pause the video and have a read of them if you want to. Next up, what sense did you make out of it? What's the meaning of these situations and experiences to you? And like we've talked about, your personal circumstances and the support that you had around you or how you interpreted things can have a big impact on the meaning that you ultimately draw from it. But it could be things like, I am unlovable, no one can be trusted, it was all my fault. There could be a real sense of injustice and unfairness or hopelessness or feeling controlled, feeling different or abnormal as a result of what's happened, feeling contaminated or evil. And there's any number of other things that a person can conclude about themselves or the world around them as a result of the things that they go through. So people go through something, they have a sense of threat to who they are on some particular level. Due to a mixture of their life circumstances and the support they have, they might draw certain conclusions about the world or life or themselves. And as a result of the conclusions they draw, they may well have a way of protecting themselves from these things happening again in the future. So this is, what did you have to do to survive? In other words, what kinds of threat response are you using? As I said before, these threat responses are what are usually referred to as symptoms as part of traditional psychiatric diagnosis. And the power threat meaning framework sees these as necessary survival strategies when the threats happened, and they may still be protective if the situation has not changed. In other words, as they say, they are there for a good reason, and these could be all kinds of different things that can be supportive and protective of a person. For example, managing overwhelming feelings, protection from physical danger, keeping a sense of control, protecting yourself from loss, hurt, rejection or abandonment, seeking or holding on to safe relationships, holding on to a sense of yourself and your identity, and all kinds of different very, very valid reasons that a person might do certain things. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the things that they do are helpful in the moment, but ultimately, I think one of the benefits of the power threat meaning framework is the consideration that these things, at least at some point in their life, even if these adaptations and these threat responses are really distressing and are causing problems now, at some point these things may have been extremely important for a person's survival. So here are some examples of threat responses. They could range from anger and rage, aggression and violence, distrust of others, hearing voices, as we talked about in the dissociative process video. Could be a freeze response, and that freeze response could happen when they might not literally be under threat by most people's standards in the here and now, but they respond with a freeze response because that part of themselves has been very much strengthened by what they've been through. And their body's trying to protect them. It could be attention or concentration problems. All of these things on here can be seen as part of this framework as being a threat response of some kind. Now, obviously, the framework isn't prescriptive. We don't get to decide why a person is having a particular threat response to certain things. The only way we can do that is to listen to the person. That's the only way we can do it. So that's the first 4 questions covered, which I think gives you a basic overview of how the framework conceptualizes mental health in general. For the last 2 questions, we're going to look at that in the next video, where we will look at a self-reflection exercise in relation to this stuff.